Gemini New DD. Welcome to the solar gold rush of 2026, where the landscape of energy production has shifted from fossil fuels to the infinite power of the sun. If you are looking to build a business that combines environmental impact with rock-solid financial returns, starting a solar farm is one of the most sophisticated moves you can make in the current economy. The transition to renewable energy is no longer a distant goal, but a massive industrial reality, and the demand for clean power is outstripping supply in almost every corner of the globe. Today, we are going to walk through the two most critical pillars of this business, which are the physical land requirements and the legal framework of power purchase agreements. By the end of this guide, you will understand exactly what it takes to turn a patch of dirt into a high-performance energy asset that generates revenue for decades. We begin with the foundation of your entire operation, which is the land. In 2026, the criteria for a viable solar farm site have become much more specific, as the best locations are quickly being snatched up by institutional developers. To build a utility-scale farm that makes financial sense, you generally need a minimum of 5 to 10 acres for a small project, but the real sweet spot for significant ROI is 20 to 50 acres. The topography of the land is your first major hurdle, because solar panels need to be mounted on relatively flat ground. A slope of more than 5 degrees can significantly increase your construction costs and complicate the installation of tracking systems that follow the sun throughout the day. You should also look for land that is clear of obstructions like heavy timber or large rock formations, because the cost of clearing and grading can eat into your initial capital before you even buy your first panel. However, the most important land requirement in 2026 is not the soil or the slope, but the proximity to infrastructure. You can have the most sun-drenched field in the world, but if it is 10 miles away from a high-voltage transmission line or a substation, your project is effectively dead on arrival. The cost of building new power lines can exceed $1 million per mile, which is an expense that most small to medium-scale developers cannot absorb. Before you sign a lease or buy a property, you must conduct an interconnection study to see if the local grid has the capacity to take the power you plan to produce. Grid congestion is a major issue this year, and some areas are already at their limit, meaning you could be forced to pay for expensive grid upgrades just to plug in your farm. Ideally, you want your site to be within 1 or 2 miles of a viable connection point to keep your interconnection costs manageable. Zoning and environmental regulations are another layer of the land puzzle that you must solve early in the process. In 2026, many local governments have updated their land use policies to either encourage or restrict solar development. You need to ensure your land is zoned for light industrial or agricultural use with a special use permit for renewable energy. You also need to conduct a thorough environmental assessment to check for protected wetlands or endangered species or historical artifacts. If your site is home to a rare bird or a sensitive ecosystem, the permitting process can drag on for years or be denied entirely. The successful solar entrepreneur of 2026 is part developer and part diplomat, working closely with local communities to ensure the project is seen as a benefit rather than an eyesore. Once you have secured the right land and confirmed the grid capacity, the next step is securing the revenue stream, which brings us to the power purchase agreement, or PPA. A PPA is a long-term contract between you, the developer, and a buyer of the electricity, which is typically a utility company or a large corporation. In 2026, the PPA is the most important document you will ever sign, because it is what makes your project bankable. Without a signed PPA in place, you will find it nearly impossible to secure the millions of dollars in financing required to build the farm. These agreements typically last between 15 and 25 years, providing you with a guaranteed price for every kilowatt-hour your panels produce. There are two primary types of PPAs you will encounter in the current market. The first is the physical PPA, where the electricity is physically delivered to the buyer through the grid. This is common when you are selling power directly to a local utility. The second is the virtual PPA, which has exploded in popularity in 2026 among tech giants and large manufacturers. In a virtual PPA, the electricity is sold into the wholesale market, and the buyer pays you the difference between the market price and a fixed strike price. This allows corporations to claim green energy credits and hedge against rising energy costs without actually being physically located near your solar farm. Understanding the nuances of these contracts is vital because they determine your cash flow and your protection against market volatility. Pricing structures within a PPA have also evolved this year. Many contracts now include a price escalator, which is a small annual increase in the rate you receive to account for inflation. In the economic environment of 2026, where inflation is a constant consideration, having a 2 or 3% annual escalator can add millions of dollars to the lifetime value of your project. You also need to look closely at the curtailment clauses, which allow the buyer to stop taking your power if the grid is oversupplied. A poorly negotiated curtailment clause can leave you with a field of panels producing power that nobody is paying for during peak sunny hours. A sophisticated PPA will include a take-or-pay provision, where the buyer must pay for a minimum amount of energy regardless of whether they can actually use it. Financing a solar farm in 2026 is a complex puzzle of debt and equity and tax incentives. The federal government continues to offer significant investment tax credits, which can cover up to 30% or more of your total project costs. Many developers use tax equity partnerships, where they bring in a large institutional investor who can use those tax credits in exchange for providing the upfront capital. This allows you to build the project with much less of your own cash and still retain a significant portion of the long-term cash flow. Additionally, green bonds and sustainable energy loans have become much more accessible this year for developers who can prove the technical and legal viability of their projects. The life cycle of a solar farm is a marathon, not a sprint. After the initial 2 to 3 years of planning and permitting and construction, you enter a 20-year phase of relatively low-maintenance operation. Unlike a factory with moving parts and complex supply chains, a solar farm just sits there and works. Your primary ongoing costs are insurance and land leases and occasional cleaning or vegetation management. In 2026, robotic cleaning systems and AI-driven monitoring have made these operations even more efficient, allowing